Shut up, don't say a word. He's hurting her right now.
Violet Edwards, 36, billionaire CEO, stepped into her Malibu mansion 3 hours early. A rough hand clamped over her mouth from behind. Shut up, don't say a word. She spun. Brandon Brown, her janitor, eyes wild with fear. Your mother, he whispered. He's hurting her right now. If you scream, he'll know you're home. Through the cracked living room door, Violet saw them. Her elderly mother with Alzheimer's cowering in a chair, while Violet's husband stood over her with cold fury in his eyes. But before we find out what happens next, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Drop a comment telling us where you're listening from right now. All right, let me tell you how a billionaire heiress discovered that the man she'd trusted with her mother's care was actually her worst nightmare, and how a janitor became the only person brave enough to show her the truth. 2 years ago, Violet Edwards' life had been different. At 34, she was already one of the most successful women in California real estate. Edwards Global Enterprises, the company her father had built and she had expanded, owned commercial properties in 12 states. Her face had graced the covers of Forbes, Fortune, and Architectural Digest. Her net worth exceeded $3 billion. But none of that mattered to Violet as much as the two people she loved most. Nathan Edwards, 38, was her world. They'd met at Stanford. She was in her MBA program. He was finishing his doctorate in environmental engineering. Love at first sight in the campus coffee shop, where Nathan had accidentally knocked his latte all over her laptop and spent the next 3 hours apologizing while trying to save her thesis. They married 2 years later. Violet's father had disapproved at first. Nathan didn't come from money, didn't have the right connections. But Nathan's intelligence, kindness, and genuine love for Violet won him over. Besides, Nathan never wanted Violet's money. He built his own environmental consulting firm, one that specialized in sustainable building practices. Their life together was beautiful. And the other person Violet loved most, her mother, Eleanor Edwards. Eleanor was 72 years old, a former literature professor with a mind as sharp as a tack and a laugh that could fill any room. She'd raised Violet single-handedly after Violet's father died when Violet was 16. Eleanor had sacrificed everything to put Violet through Stanford, working double shifts as both a professor and a private tutor. Education is the one thing no one can take from you, Eleanor always said. Violet adored her mother. Every Sunday without fail, Violet and Nathan would have dinner at Eleanor's cozy cottage in Pasadena. They'd drink wine, debate philosophy, and laugh until their stomachs hurt. It was perfect, until it wasn't. The first sign came on a Tuesday evening. Eleanor called Violet at work, panic in her voice. "Violet, where am I? I can't remember how to get home." Violet's stomach dropped. "Mum, you're at home. I can hear your grandfather clock in the background." Silence. "Mum?" "Oh." Eleanor's voice was small, confused. "I suppose I am. I'm sorry, darling. I don't know why I called." Violet dismissed it as stress. Her mother was getting older. These things happened, but they kept happening. Eleanor would forget conversations they'd just had. She'd call Violet by her deceased father's name. She'd get lost driving to the grocery store she'd visited for 30 years. Nathan noticed it too. "We should get her checked out," he said gently one night. "It might be nothing, but it might be something we can manage if we catch it early." Violet knew he was right. The diagnosis hit like a truck. Early onset Alzheimer's disease, progressive, irreversible, cruel. The doctor explained that Eleanor was in the early stages, that she could still live independently for a while, but that eventually she'd need full-time care. Memory would fade. Personality might change. The brilliant, witty Eleanor Edwards would slowly disappear. Violet sobbed in Nathan's arms that night. "I can't lose her," she whispered. "Not like this, not piece by piece." "You won't lose her," Nathan promised. "We'll take care of her, together." And they did. Violet moved Eleanor into the Malibu estate. The house was massive, 12 bedrooms, 10 bathrooms. There was plenty of room. They converted the entire east wing into Eleanor's private suite. Bedroom, sitting room, small kitchen, garden access. Nathan designed the renovations himself, making sure everything was safe and beautiful for Eleanor. "She deserves dignity," he said, "no matter what." They hired a full-time nurse, then 2, around-the-clock care, the best money could buy. And for a while, it worked. Eleanor had good days and bad days. On good days, she'd remember everything, would discuss literature with Nathan for hours, would give Violet business advice that was still razor-sharp. On bad days, she'd call Violet Margaret, her long-deceased sister, or wouldn't remember Nathan at all. But she was safe, loved, cared for. Violet was grateful for every moment. Then the accident happened. Nathan was driving home from a client meeting on Pacific Coast Highway when a 22-year-old kid, texting while driving, crossed the center line. Nathan died on impact. Violet's world shattered. The funeral was massive. 500 people came to pay their respects. Nathan had touched so many lives, colleagues, clients, the families he'd helped build sustainable homes for, the students he'd mentored. Violet stood at the graveside in a black Chanel dress, numb, trying to comprehend that her husband, her best friend, her partner, her love, was gone. Eleanor stood beside her, clutching Violet's hand. "I'm sorry about your friend, dear," Eleanor said softly, confusion in her eyes. He seemed like a kind man. She didn't remember Nathan was her son-in-law. Violet's heart broke twice that day. The months after Nathan's death were the darkest of Violet's life. She was drowning in grief while trying to run a billion-dollar company and care for a mother whose memory was slipping away faster now. The stress of the funeral seemed to have accelerated Eleanor's decline. The nurses helped, but they weren't family. Violet was exhausted, lost, barely functioning. She needed help. That's when Richard Crane entered their lives. Richard Crane, 45, was introduced to Violet at a charity gala 6 months after Nathan's death. He was handsome, tall, with salt and pepper hair and a charming smile. He worked in finance, managing investments for high-net-worth clients. He was also a widower, he said, lost his wife to cancer 3 years prior. No children. "I understand loss," Richard said that first night, his voice warm and sympathetic. "It's a club no one wants to join." Violet found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't with anyone since Nathan's death. Richard listened. He didn't try to rush her grief or offer platitudes. He just understood. They started dating slowly. Dinners, museum trips, long walks on the beach where Violet could talk about Nathan without feeling like a burden. Richard was patient, kind, supportive. "Take your time," he'd say. "I'm not going anywhere." What made Richard different was how he treated Eleanor. From the beginning, he was gentle with her, patient, understanding. "My grandmother had dementia," he told Violet. "I know how hard it is, how heartbreaking. I want to help you carry this burden." He'd visit Eleanor, bring her flowers, sit with her when she was confused. He'd call her Mrs. Edwards with respect and kindness. Eleanor, on her good days, seemed to like him. "He's a gentleman," she told Violet once. "Not like that other one you brought around." She didn't remember Nathan. 1 year after Nathan's death, Richard proposed. "I know I can never replace Nathan," he said, kneeling in her garden. "I would never try. But I can love you. I can help you with Eleanor. I can be a partner, a support. Let me share this life with you." Violet said yes. She was tired of being alone. The wedding was small, just family and close friends. Eleanor was there, sitting in the front row, occasionally calling Violet by her deceased aunt's name, but seeming happy nonetheless. Everyone said Violet deserved happiness again. Everyone said Richard was perfect for her. Everyone was wrong. Richard Crane was not who he appeared to be. The man Violet married was a carefully constructed facade, a mask of charm and kindness, hiding something much darker underneath. But Violet didn't see it, not at first. The changes were subtle in the beginning. 2 months after the wedding, Richard suggested Violet increase her work hours. "The company needs you," he said. "I can handle things at home. That's what partners do. I'll make sure Eleanor is taken care of." It made sense. Edwards Global was facing a hostile takeover attempt. Violet needed to focus, so she started working longer hours, leaving at 7 instead of 8, coming home at 9 instead of 6. Richard assured her Eleanor was fine. "She had a good day," he'd say. "We sat in the garden. She told me about her teaching days." Violet believed him. That was her first mistake. Brandon Brown had worked for the Edwards estate for 6 years. He'd started as a landscaper, maintaining the sprawling grounds of the Malibu property. His work ethic and attention to detail impressed the estate manager so much that he was promoted to maintenance manager, overseeing all the property's upkeep. Brandon was quiet, reserved, the kind of man who showed up early, worked hard, and left without fanfare. He lived in a small apartment above the garage, part of his compensation package, but he noticed things. Brandon had lost his own grandmother to Alzheimer's. He'd watched it steal her mind piece by piece. He understood the cruelty of the disease, so he paid attention to Eleanor Edwards. He'd see her in the garden, talking to her roses like they were old friends. He'd watch the nurses come and go. He'd notice the days when she remembered who she was and the days when she didn't. Eleanor was kind to him. On her good days, she'd call him over, ask about his work, compliment his gardening. "You have your grandfather's hands," she told him once, touching his calloused fingers. "Good, honest hands." She'd never met his grandfather, but Brandon didn't correct her. The kindness was real, even if the memory wasn't. When Richard Crane moved in, Brandon noticed the change immediately. At first, it was small things. The way Eleanor flinched when Richard entered a room. The way her eyes, bright and curious even in confusion, would go dull and frightened when he spoke to her. The way the nurses started looking uncomfortable. Brandon told himself he was imagining things. Richard seemed nice enough, smiled at the staff, thanked them for their work. But something felt off. 3 months after Richard moved in, Brandon was fixing a window in the east wing when he heard it. Richard's voice, cold, cruel. "You stupid old woman. I told you to stay in your room. Can't you follow simple instructions? Do you know how exhausting it is to deal with your constant confusion?" Eleanor's voice, trembling, scared. "I'm sorry, I can't remember." "You can't remember anything, can you? You're nothing but a burden. Your daughter works herself to death while I babysit you. The least you could do is stay where I put you." Brandon's blood ran cold. That wasn't caregiving. That was abuse. He crept closer, staying hidden. Through a crack in the door, he saw Eleanor sitting in a chair, her frail shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Richard stood over her, face twisted with contempt. "Stop crying. You always cry. It's pathetic." "I want Violet," Eleanor whimpered. "Violet has more important things to do than deal with you. She's working, making money, cleaning up the mess your family made, and you sit here drooling and forgetting everything, expecting people to cater to your every need." Eleanor cowered. Brandon's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at him to intervene, to burst in, to protect this vulnerable woman. But what could he do? He was the help. Richard was the husband. Brandon had no proof of anything beyond harsh words. If he accused Richard, he'd lose his job, his home, everything. And then who would watch over Eleanor? So Brandon stayed hidden, and he watched. Over the following weeks, Brandon made himself as invisible as possible while observing everything. What he saw made his stomach turn. Richard was meticulous, perfect in public, the devoted stepson-in-law, the supportive husband. But behind closed doors, when Violet was at work, the mask came off. Brandon witnessed Richard isolating Eleanor from her nurses, sending them on unnecessary errands so he could berate her alone. He heard Richard's voice, calm and cold, telling Eleanor she was worthless, that she was destroying Violet's life, that no one wanted her, that she'd be better off dead. He saw Eleanor's hands shake when she heard Richard's footsteps, saw the fear in her eyes, fear that she couldn't even articulate because her disease robbed her of the words. And the worst part, Eleanor couldn't tell anyone. Her memory was too fragmented. Her words came and went. Even when she tried to express fear or discomfort, it came out confused, jumbled. "The angry man," she'd say to the nurses. "He says things, bad things." But the nurses assumed she meant someone from her past, a memory surfacing. That happened with Alzheimer's patients. Richard counted on that. He was abusing a woman whose disease made her the perfect victim, unable to clearly report what was happening to her. Brandon documented everything. He kept a journal, dates, times, what he witnessed. He couldn't take photos, too risky. But he wrote everything down in meticulous detail. He didn't know what he'd do with it yet, but he knew somehow, someday, someone needed to know the truth. 6 months passed. Richard's cruelty toward Eleanor intensified. He'd moved beyond verbal abuse. Brandon witnessed him roughly grabbing Eleanor's arm when she wandered, saw bruises on her thin skin, heard him threaten to put her in a facility where they'll drug you into silence. Eleanor was deteriorating, not just from the Alzheimer's, but from the abuse. She'd stopped eating properly, stopped going into the garden she loved. She'd sit in her chair, silent and afraid, waiting for Richard's next visit. The bright, kind woman Brandon had known was disappearing, and not just because of her disease. And Violet saw none of it. She was drowning in work. The hostile takeover had escalated. Board meetings, shareholder votes, legal battles. She was fighting to save her father's company, while her mother suffered under her own roof. When she did see Eleanor, it was briefly, a quick kiss on the forehead before bed, a short visit on weekends. Eleanor would try to tell her. "The man," she'd say, clutching Violet's hand. He's not kind." "Richard, Mom, Richard is wonderful. He takes such good care of you when I'm at work." Eleanor would shake her head, frustration and confusion warring on her face. The words wouldn't come, and Violet believed what she needed to believe, that her mother was confused, that Richard was helping, that everything was fine. Brandon watched, and waited, and documented. He knew eventually an opportunity would come. It came on a Tuesday afternoon. Violet's meeting was cancelled. She came home early, 3 hours early. Brandon was in the garage when he heard her car pull up the driveway. His heart stopped. Today was bad. Brandon had seen Richard that morning, heard him telling the nurses to take a long lunch. "I'll handle Mrs. Edwards," he'd said with that charming smile. But Brandon knew what that meant. If Violet walked in now. Brandon ran. He caught her in the foyer just as she was about to call out for Richard. "Shut up! Don't say a word." His hand covered her mouth. Desperate, terrified, not for himself, for Eleanor. If Violet confronted Richard without understanding, without proof, he'd manipulate his way out. He'd paint Brandon as a liar, paint Eleanor as confused, paint himself as the victim of false accusations. Brandon had seen it before. Growing up in foster care, the abusers always had explanations, always had charm, always had plausibility. Violet needed to see the truth with her own eyes. She needed to understand before she could act. So Brandon held her mouth, his eyes pleading. "Please," he whispered, "your mother is in danger. He's hurting her. But if he knows you're home, if you don't see what I need to show you, he'll talk his way out of it. Please. Trust me." Violet's eyes were wild. Her mother, danger. But something in Brandon's expression, the desperation, the genuine terror, made her pause. She nodded. Brandon released her mouth but kept his voice barely audible. "Follow me. Don't make a sound. You need to see what he does when you're not here." They crept down the hallway toward Eleanor's wing. Violet's heart hammered in her chest. Her mother. What was happening to her mother? From Eleanor's sitting room came sounds. Richard's voice, cold, measured. "How many times do I have to tell you? Stay in this room. You're nothing but a problem. Your daughter would be better off if you just disappeared." Eleanor's voice, weak, frightened. "Please, I'm sorry. I don't remember." "You don't remember anything because you're a pathetic, broken old woman." Violet's blood turned to ice. Brandon positioned her by the cracked door. "Look," he breathed, "but don't move. Not yet. You need to see everything." Violet looked, and her world collapsed. In the sitting room, her mother, 74 years old, frail, confused, cowered in her chair. Her thin frame was shaking. Tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks. Her hands, once elegant and strong, trembled in her lap. And standing over her, a glass of expensive scotch in his hand, was Richard Crane, the man Violet had married, trusted, brought into her home. "Your daughter works 80 hours a week," Richard said, his voice casual, almost pleasant. "She's exhausted, stressed. And why? Because of you. You're a drain, a burden. Every dollar she spends on your care, every hour she worries about you, that's your fault." Eleanor sobbed. I want Violet. Violet doesn't want you. She keeps you here out of guilt, obligation, not love. How could anyone love someone as useless as you?" Behind the door, Violet's hand flew to her mouth to stop her own scream. Brandon's hand rested gently on her shoulder, anchoring her. Richard continued, "You know what would be best? If you just died, quietly, in your sleep. Everyone would be relieved. Your daughter could finally live her life without dragging around your corpse." Eleanor's sobs grew louder. "That's enough," Violet said, her voice deadly calm. She pushed through the door. Richard's head whipped toward her, shock quickly morphing into calculated composure. "Violet, darling, you're home early. Get away from my mother." Violet crossed the room in 3 strides, positioning herself between Richard and Eleanor. "This isn't what it looks like. I heard everything." Violet's voice shook with fury. "Everything. Telling my mother she's a burden, that she should die, that I don't love her. She was having an episode. I was just—" "You were abusing her," Violet screamed. "An elderly woman with Alzheimer's who can't even defend herself." Richard's mask slipped. "Abuse? I've been taking care of her. Do you know how hard it is? She wanders, she forgets, she cries constantly. I've been doing you a favor." "A favor?" Violet laughed, the sound jagged and sharp. "By terrorizing her, by bruising her arms, by telling her she's worthless." "She is worthless," Richard snapped, his composure finally cracking. "She's a vegetable, Violet, a drain on resources. Every dollar you spend keeping her alive is a dollar wasted, and you're too stupid and sentimental to see it." The room went silent. Richard seemed to realize what he'd said. "Violet, I didn't mean—" "Get out." Her voice was ice. "Let's talk about this. Get out of my house. Now. I'm your husband. You can't just watch me." Violet pulled out her phone. "I have the best lawyers money can buy. I have a witness." She gestured to Brandon, who stood in the doorway. "And I have a mother with bruises that match your fingerprints. Get out now." Richard's eyes darted between Violet, Brandon, and Eleanor. For a moment, Violet thought he might refuse, but Richard was a calculator, always running odds. "Fine." He straightened his jacket. "But this isn't over. We'll see what a court says when I tell them about your neglect. How you work constantly while your mother deteriorates. How you—" "Get out!" Violet screamed. Richard walked toward the door, pausing beside Brandon. "You think you're a hero?" he sneered. "You're a janitor who just ruined his life for some old woman with dementia." Brandon met his gaze steadily. "I'm someone who protects the vulnerable. That's enough." Richard laughed coldly and walked out. The moment the door closed, Violet collapsed beside her mother. "Mom! Oh, God! Mom! I'm so sorry!" Eleanor looked at her with confused, tearful eyes. "Violet, is that you?" "Yes, Mom, it's me. I'm here. I'm so sorry I wasn't here before. I'm so sorry I didn't see—" Eleanor's hand, trembling and frail, reached out to touch Violet's cheek. "The angry man is gone?" "Yes, Mom. He's gone. He's never coming back. I promise." Eleanor's face crumpled with relief, and she began to cry. Not the frightened sobs of before, but tears of release. Violet held her mother, rocking her gently, tears streaming down her own face. Brandon stood nearby, uncertain. He'd done his part, delivered the truth. Now he was the outsider again. He turned to leave. "Brandon!" Violet's voice stopped him. "Wait!" He turned back. She looked up at him, her face streaked with tears, her arms around her mother. "Thank you. You saved her. You saved us." Brandon's throat tightened. Someone had to." "You didn't have to. You risked everything, your job, your home, for my mother." "She's a kind woman who deserved protection," Brandon said simply. "That's enough." Violet nodded, something shifting in her expression. "Stay. Please. We need help, real help, someone I can trust. And you're the only person who's shown me you actually care about my mother's welfare." Brandon hesitated. "Mrs. Edwards, Violet, please, call me Violet." "Violet, I don't know if it's appropriate." "Appropriate?" She laughed bitterly. "I just discovered my husband was psychologically torturing my elderly mother while I worked myself to death. I have no idea what appropriate is anymore. What I know is that you protected her when I couldn't." Brandon looked at Eleanor, who was watching him with those kind eyes, still confused, still fragmented, but grateful. "Please stay," Eleanor said softly. "You have kind hands." Brandon's resolve crumbled. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll stay." The weeks that followed were chaos. Divorce proceedings, lawyers, police reports, elder abuse investigations, restraining orders. Richard tried to fight back, tried to paint himself as the victim. But Violet's lawyers were ruthless, and Brandon's detailed documentation proved invaluable. Every date, every incident, every cruel word meticulously recorded. The judge granted Violet full divorce and a permanent restraining order within 2 months. Richard disappeared. Good riddance. But the damage was done. Eleanor needed intensive care now, not just for the Alzheimer's, but for the trauma. She'd developed anxiety on top of her cognitive decline. She'd flinch at loud noises. She'd cry out in her sleep. Violet took a leave of absence from work. For the first time in her life, she prioritized her mother completely. No meetings, no acquisitions, no board calls, just her mother. She was there for every moment, every confused morning, every frightened evening, every small victory when Eleanor remembered something clearly, and Brandon was there too. He'd become essential to the household in ways neither he nor Violet had anticipated. He drove Eleanor to doctor's appointments when Violet had court dates. He sat with Eleanor in the garden, listening to her fragmented stories about her teaching days. He fixed things around the house while quietly providing stability and calm. Eleanor gravitated toward him. On her good days, she'd seek him out, ask him to help her tend her roses. She'd tell him stories, some real, some confused, about her life. Brandon would listen patiently, never correcting her, just being present. "You're a good boy," she'd say, patting his hand. "Your grandmother raised you right." On her bad days, when she didn't remember who anyone was, she still seemed calmed by Brandon's presence. His steady, quiet energy soothed her anxiety. Violet watched these interactions with growing gratitude. And something else, something she wasn't ready to name yet. 6 months after Richard left, Violet invited Brandon for dinner. Not as an employee, as a friend. "You've been part of our healing," she said. "The least I can do is feed you properly." Brandon hesitated. The social boundaries still felt murky. "Please," Eleanor added, having a clear moment. "I'd like that. You make good conversation." Brandon looked at the two women, one young and grieving, one elderly and fading, both kind. "All right," he agreed, "but I'm bringing dessert." That dinner became a weekly tradition. Every Thursday, Brandon joined them for dinner. He'd bring something he'd baked, he'd learned from his grandmother. Apple pie, chocolate cake, banana bread. Eleanor loved it. "Your grandmother's recipes?" she asked one evening, savoring the pie. "Yes, Mom. She taught you well. Food is love, you know. The care you put into making something for someone else. That's love in its purest form." Brandon smiled. She used to say the same thing. Violet found herself looking forward to those dinners more than she expected. Brandon was different. He wasn't charming like Richard. He didn't have smooth words or calculated compliments. He was quiet, steady, genuine. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, his words were thoughtful, considered. He never tried to impress, never performed. He just was. And that authenticity, that realness, was exactly what Violet and Eleanor needed. One Thursday evening, after Eleanor had gone to bed, Violet and Brandon sat on the back porch, drinking coffee and watching the stars. "Can I ask you something?" Violet said. "Of course." "Why did you do it? Risk everything to help my mother. You could have lost your job, your home." Brandon was quiet for a long moment. "When I was 12, he finally said, my parents died in a car accident. I went into foster care. My grandmother tried to get custody, but she was sick. The state said she couldn't care for me." Violet's heart ached. She died when I was 15, alone, in a care facility where the staff didn't treat her well. I visited when I could, but I was a kid, powerless. I saw how they talked to her, how they dismissed her because she was old and sick. Brandon's voice was steady, but pain echoed beneath the surface. "When I saw what Richard was doing to your mother, I saw my grandmother, vulnerable, dismissed, abused, and I knew I couldn't walk away, couldn't be another person who saw but did nothing." Violet's eyes filled with tears. "Brandon, I'm so sorry for what happened to your grandmother, and for not seeing what was happening to my mother. You couldn't have known. Richard was careful, strategic, and you were drowning in grief and work. He counted on that. That's no excuse. I should have seen my mother suffering. You're seeing her now. You're here now. That matters." Violet looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, past the reserved exterior, past the maintenance uniform, past the social divide that shouldn't have existed. She saw a good man, a kind man, a man who protected the vulnerable because he'd once been powerless to protect someone he loved. "You're a good person, Brandon Brown," she said softly. He met her gaze. "So are you, Violet Edwards, a good daughter who lost her way temporarily and found it again." Something passed between them in that moment. Recognition, understanding, the beginning of something neither of them expected. A year after Richard left, Violet realized she was falling for Brandon. It terrified her. After Nathan's death and Richard's betrayal, the thought of loving someone again felt dangerous. But Brandon wasn't Nathan or Richard. He was Brandon, patient, steady, trustworthy. He'd proven himself through actions, not words. Every day for a year he'd shown up. For Eleanor, for her. Never pushing, never expecting, never taking, just being there. Eleanor adored him. On her good days, she'd call him her guardian angel. On her bad days, his presence still calmed her. And Violet had healed too. She'd learned to trust again, to be present, to prioritize what mattered. She'd stepped back from work, promoting trusted executives while she focused on what was important, her mother's remaining time. But the feelings for Brandon, those felt complicated. Was it gratitude, transference, something else? She analyzed it endlessly and kept coming back to the same conclusion. She loved him, his quiet strength, his gentle humor, his unwavering integrity. The way he made her feel safe, the way he loved her mother. But he was her employee. The social divide was enormous. What would people think? Eleanor, as if reading her thoughts during a clear moment, said one afternoon, "You know, dear, class is just something people invented to keep love in boxes. Your father was a blue-collar worker when I met him. Best decision I ever made was seeing the man, not the label." Violet stared at her mother. "Mom, how did you—" "I may be losing my memory, darling, but I'm not blind. The way you look at that young man, the way he looks at you, that's real." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Don't waste time, Violet. Life is too short. Trust me, I know." That evening, Violet found Brandon in the garage, maintaining the lawnmower. "Can we talk?" she asked. He looked up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Of course. Everything okay?" "Yes. No. Maybe." Brandon set down his tools, giving her his full attention. Violet took a breath. "This is probably completely inappropriate. You work for me. There's a power imbalance, social differences, a million reasons why this is a terrible idea." "Violet," Brandon interrupted gently, "what is it?" "I have feelings for you." The words rushed out. "Romantic feelings. And I know that's complicated and possibly unwelcome, but my mother just gave me a lecture about not wasting time and—" "Violet, I understand if you don't feel the same. You probably see me as your employer." "Violet." "What?" "I have feelings for you too." She stopped mid-ramble. "You do?" Brandon nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "For a while now, but I didn't think—" "You're you. Successful, wealthy, beautiful, and I'm—" "The man who saved my mother, who showed me what integrity looks like, who makes me feel safe for the first time in years." I was going to say the maintenance guy. "Don't do that." Violet stepped closer. "Don't reduce yourself to a job title. You are so much more than that." Brandon's eyes softened. "So where does this leave us?" he asked. "I don't know," Violet admitted. "We should probably take it slow." "Slow sounds good. Maybe dinner. Just us? See if this is real?" "It's real," Brandon said quietly. "At least for me." "For me too," Violet whispered. They stood there in the garage, Two people from different worlds who'd found each other in the wreckage of tragedy. And for the first time in a long time, both felt hope. Their relationship developed slowly, carefully. They took time, dated properly, went to dinners, movies, long walks on the beach where they talked for hours. Brandon officially quit his position as maintenance manager. It felt wrong to date his employer. Violet hired a replacement, and Brandon started his own small landscaping business. Violet didn't care about the money difference. She had plenty. What she needed was a partner who was honest, kind, and real. Brandon was that partner. Eleanor was thrilled. On her good days, she'd watch them together with knowing eyes. "I knew it," she'd say. "The moment I saw him touch my roses with such gentleness, I knew he had a good heart." On her bad days, she'd still smile when they were together, as if sensing the happiness even when she couldn't name it. 2 years after Richard left, Brandon proposed, not with a fancy ring or elaborate setup. He proposed in Eleanor's garden, surrounded by the roses he'd helped her tend. "I know I can't give you mansions or yachts," he said, holding a simple but beautiful ring, "but I can give you honesty, loyalty, a partner who will always put your family first, who will help you care for Eleanor for as long as she's with us, who will be there every single day. Violet, will you marry me?" Before Violet could answer, Eleanor shuffled out to the garden. "Say yes," she said clearly. "He's one of the good ones. I can tell." Violet laughed through tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Eleanor clapped her hands like a child. Brandon slipped the ring on Violet's finger, a perfect fit. And in that moment, surrounded by roses and love and the certainty of mortality, 3 people knew one thing for certain. Time was precious, love was real, and they were home. The wedding was small, garden ceremony, close friends and family only. Eleanor was there, sitting in the front row in her best dress, occasionally calling Violet Margaret, but beaming nonetheless. The ceremony was perfect, not because of decorations or expense, because it was real, honest, full of love that had been earned through trials and proven through action. When Brandon and Violet kissed, Eleanor cheered the loudest. Nathan, wherever he was, surely smiled. Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep 3 years after the wedding. She was 77 years old. Violet held her hand at the end. "Thank you, Mom," Violet whispered, "for everything, for raising me, for loving me, for teaching me what matters." Eleanor's last words, spoken on a remarkably clear day the week before, stayed with Violet forever. "I'm not scared, darling. I've had a wonderful life. I've loved and been loved. I've raised a daughter who makes me proud, and I've seen her find happiness again. What more could I ask for? Just promise me one thing. Keep living, keep loving. Don't waste a single moment." "I promise, Mom," Eleanor smiled. "Good girl. Now be happy. That's all I've ever wanted for you." The funeral was beautiful, simple, full of flowers from Eleanor's garden. Brandon stood beside Violet, steady and strong. 2 years after Eleanor's passing, Violet and Brandon sat on their back porch, their favorite spot, watching the sunset. They'd sold the Malibu mansion. Too many memories, good and bad. They'd bought a comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood, not extravagant, just right. "Do you miss her?" Brandon asked softly. "Every day," Violet said. "But I'm grateful for the time we had, for the fact that she saw me happy again before she left, for you." "Me? You saved her, Brandon. Those last years, after Richard with you there, she was happy, safe, loved. You gave her that." Brandon's eyes were wet. "She was easy to love. So are you." He looked at her. "I love you, Violet Edwards Brown." "I love you too, Brandon Brown." She'd hyphenated her name, kept Edwards for her legacy, added Brown for her future. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. My mother's last words, about not wasting moments, about living and loving. She was wise. She was. Violet leaned into him. I'm glad we listened. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. Brandon? Yeah? Thank you for seeing us, for saving us, for staying. Thank you for letting me, for trusting me, for building this with me. Best decision I ever made. Second best. What's the first? Listening to your mother about not wasting time. Violet laughed, the sound free and joyful, and in that laughter was everything. Every loss, every fear, every triumph, every moment that had led them here, home. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real, and it was theirs. Forever. The end, or rather, the beginning. Because in homes built on love, trust, and the courage to start again, endings are just new beginnings in disguise. And for the Edwards-Brown family, every moment was precious. Every day was a gift. And love, real, honest, earned love, was the greatest treasure of all.